If you are going to study Buddhism or yoga, so Hinduism, let's say, you always encounter a term, a word which is called duḥkha. Duḥkha basically means, it's normally translated as suffering. Suffering is a little bit of a heavy word, so you might find people including the group, that would prefer to translate dukkha instead of suffering as dissatisfaction. So, like not feeling as happy or joy as you could. And the idea of those philosophies, such as Buddhism and again most of, at least the yoga part of Hinduism, is that life is kind of permeated by that feeling of dissatisfaction. Sounds a little bit pessimistic, but these philosophies, religions, spiritual perspectives, they also say that there's a way of uh, overcoming it or changing it. But that's the subject of another talk. Then in Buddhism and in yoga, they also have classified the types of suffering. So it's not just simplistic saying as well, there is suffering. No, there are ways that we experience this dissatisfaction or this annoyance with life sometimes, or dejection, being put down by life. So the times that we feel we are not getting what we want, we're not getting what we expect. And in both, in the yoga tradition, in the Buddhist tradition, they normally have divided this dukkha, this dissatisfaction, in three ways. The first way that it was classified is dissatisfaction with life due to pain. So suffering, even the word suffering, when you say that in English, it brings to mind most probably the idea of physical pain, like when you get physically hurt or you have a disease or anything that is physically hurting you. Suffering has this kind of very heavy connotation. The physical suffering normally has this very heavy connotation. Imagine the idea of torture, for example, something that brings a lot of a bad feeling, a bad understanding. So this first way of that life causes to us, this first way is the suffering of pain. It's understood as something that no one can avoid. It will come through natural causes, so aging and sickness, and even death, dying. So that includes, in general, some level of some experience of physical pain. So it's inescapable. There's no way to really overcome it. You have to make peace with it. Also, especially in the Yoga Sankhya tradition, they will say that this pain, suffering, comes from three sources. One is from ourselves. So sometimes we, due to habits, due to actions, ways of being, etc., we cause pain to our own selves. So we put ourselves in situations, we get into habits which end up hurting us. That suffering can be caused by other beings, so that's number two. Let's say animals or other humans. Sometimes maybe they hit us or they hurt us, or an animal might bite us, trying to protect themselves, etc. So this painful suffering can be caused by other beings. And number three can be caused by nature. So think of natural disasters. It's not exactly a being like an animal or a person, but earthquakes or global warming, weather things. And classically, traditionally, they also say about astrology. So you're having like a bad time, and then it looks like things are just don't cooperate. Things go wrong. It's like bad luck. So you have these three ways of having these physical, painful feelings, physical sufferings, also included mental, of course, but this suffering is a very physical experience. So by oneself, by other beings, and by nature. We have a second mode of suffering, which is, there are different translations for this one. Is in, you find it in Sanskrit, in Pali, as sankhara dukkha. There are different ways of understanding this concept of how we suffer. The way that I might find interesting to put here is that we suffer due to getting into habits of mind which are actually not good. So there will be forming bad habits on the mind, forming bad ways of thinking, forming, when I say bad, is because it will promote suffering, it will cause complications. And that's basically due to greed, due to hatred, annoyance, due to not knowing better, like due to ignorance. We get into positions or get into ways of personality, like personality building, which end up being not ideal. And then we suffer due to that. Also related to this second level of suffering, this sankhara dukkha, is the fact that life is kind of, it's pretty much, according to this view, it's impossible to have a sense of getting perfect. Like as soon as you kind of conquer something, or as soon as you feel that you have finalized or achieved something, again it doesn't end. There will be like another step to move into. Very simply, imagine when you're young and you want to become an adult and get this and get that and do this and do that, and once you have actually achieved it, of course it will open up another door, another step, another direction to move into. So this kind of tendency of life, especially for humans, that it never ends. It's a samsara. It's an ongoing process that feels like it has no stoppage. On Buddhism and yoga philosophy, they say that there is a possibility of stoppage, which would be enlightenment, but that's not the case here. For us, in general living, we can possibly agree that there's this feeling of the imperfectibility of living. There's no way to finalize it, to finish it. The third way of dukkha, of suffering, is the suffering of impermanence, so viparinama or parinama dukkha. It's a hallmark of, especially of Buddhism, this idea of the emphasis on knowing and observing, experiencing the changeable nature of existence. So the fact that things do not stay solid or fixed. And the point here is that there's both a sensation that you cannot rely then on, let's say, life, because as soon as you build up something, it will break apart. And also there's this other correlation with positiveness, in the sense that even if you get something that you enjoy, it's bound to change and to break apart. I think the easiest example would be, let's say, a property. Let's say you're dreaming of having a house, or you build up a house, and once that project is finished, as soon as it's finished, the only direction now is to break apart. So as soon as you have bought a property, as you finish construction, you already have to start maintenance, because that now is starting to break. Or a car, as soon as you take out of let's say, a fresh car, new car, as soon as you take out of the car shop, it's already running its mileage. It's already going to count for maintenance, for revision. So there's this impermanence, or the breaking apart of things in nature, which causes dissatisfaction to us. One way that is portrayed in these traditions that you might be able to at least have a relief is through meditation. Eventually, all these things are bound up with the mind. Even physical suffering, there's an aspect of mental suffering to it. There's an aspect of how you perceive pain. But all that is bound especially to the mind. And then through meditation, by seeing impermanence, by releasing this expectation of perfectibility or achieving, by being in peace with the body and the discomfort of the body. So through meditation, you might be able to start opening up moments, or hopefully larger periods, that there's an easiness from those conditions. And hopefully through practice, through reflection, you're trying to extend periods of time in which that openness or that easiness from those sufferings, they are extended. And that will prove that let's say, the solution for the suffering is not external, so it doesn't come from controlling the circumstances in nature or in living, but actually the solution, let's say, for that suffering comes from the mind itself, from the transformation of perception, experience of the mind itself.